All right, everyone, if you take your seats again, we'll get going with our fourth panel of the day here at this policy summit. And we'll invite the panelists to the stage. And moderating, winning the war on higher ed, finding a solution, is Joel Heitkamp.
Come on up, guys. Well, hello, everyone, again. It didn't really matter today, did it, which topic it was? It all turned to higher education, didn't it, Bill? At some point or another, higher education became part of the topic, which I think tells you how important some of these topics are. Questions have already come up about tenure. They've come up about whether or not we're targeting the right industry. I know you're going to have a million questions for these gentlemen, so I just want to remind you, you can send your text to 2233, text GNDC in the text, then leave a space, then put your question. It'll get to me up here. Also, you of course can tweet to #ND Summit, and we will get it there as well. We have one replacement from your program. Dr. Kevin Melliker, who is currently on the Board of Higher Education, is going to be part of our panel as well. Tom Shorma, WCCO Belting, which, Tom, I've been struggling not to say WAP Canvas for how long. You know how much I love your company and what you've done for our area. Bill Schlub, a man that I respect immensely, that I got to work with when he was lobbying on your behalf, quite frankly, and we had some spirited debates and talks, and then Representative Dosh, who has been no wallflower when it comes to this issue. He's been willing to ask what I think is a lot of relevant, very tough questions, and so I think they put a great panel together for you. Instead of an opening statement, if we can, gentlemen, I'm going to begin with this because I think it'll lead into what you want to say anyway for an opening statement, which is, what is higher education? What is higher education? And I'm going to go with you, Representative Dosh, first.
Well, higher education obviously is giving our kids and young adults and others the knowledge and the tools that they need to go out and be a productive member of society.
Okay. Bill?
I think it encompasses more than what we generally talk about.
Right.
We talk about higher education as being a means to prepare workers to go into the workplace and do that. And I went into the workplace from a liberal arts degree with a major in contemporary literature. So I think it also has to focus beyond preparing people actually to do a job. It has to focus on making folks complete so that they can become leaders in the future, so they don't take narrow views. They're able to look at the large picture and go ahead. And there is room still for the liberal arts college in our higher education thing, along with everything else. And we have to emphasize all of those things going forward.
And I'm going to go to you, Doctor. You're on the board, so you better get this one right, just so you know.
Higher education is, according to Dr. Ann Blackhurst, who recently spoke at a TED conference in Fargo, the role of higher education is to create engaged and ethical citizens, and most of all, innovators.
And I'm going to get to you, Tom. What's your thoughts on this? You hire a lot of people.
We do, but higher education as a whole is there to provide the opportunity for students to learn and how to be successful in business in the real world.
Okay. It's kind of broad, though, isn't it? Right? Define for me this. Success in higher education. Does it have to come with a degree? And the reason that I ask you this is because North Dakota has a high rate of dropout after the first year on a nationwide average. And I'm going to go with you first on this, Doctor.
I think it does. And the reason that I say that is that I feel that the experience and the education that students have when they leave our colleges and universities is second to none, plus the amount of opportunities that opens up for them. Dr. Sanford did a study a couple years ago that showed that people coming out of education, colleges and university secondary education, higher education, are apt to make almost twice the income of people coming out of high school. So in my opinion, yes, there is certainly many other opportunities for people to to gain knowledge and to gain experience. And some are very lucky. They end up in wonderful positions and wonderful opportunities as they move forward. But just to have that degree to me is a big deal.
Bill, I'd like your take on that.
I agree. Success, the measurement, the goal is to get a degree. So I think that higher ed has to measure, the biggest thing they have to measure themselves by is the number of degrees they're giving out, how well trained the folks are coming out of there. Now that's not to say there isn't room for anything else, but when higher education is measuring itself, the only way to do it is to measure it by the number of degrees you're producing and the quality of the graduates you're producing.
So then let's grade them. Let's talk about higher ed in North Dakota. Representative Dosh, are we passing?
I believe we passed. We do have a good education system. Sometimes, however, I believe that, in getting to your success question is, success I think in the past has been defined as a 4-year degree. And in the environment that we live in North Dakota today, I mean, you have plumbers, electricians, all these people that are needed in the trades, a 2-year trade that has become just as important, if not more so. So, I think the state in a lot of our 2 years are providing that education that we need, the trades, but I think we need to see more of it.
Tom, I'm not asking you this question because you're from my home area and I love what you do for our area. I'm asking you because it matters. How many people do you have working for you right now at WCCO Belting?
200 at our facility in Lopton, but we also have a plant in Arlington, Texas that employs 50.
Okay, so we've got multiple people that went. I think I can go now. Okay, we have multiple people working for you at CCO Belting that really have come through the system. So I'm curious what you think. Are we succeeding?
Well, WCCO Belting's workforce has, just about every one of our employees has either attended a 2-year institution, graduated from a 2-year institution, or graduated from a 4-year institution. That, to be able to work in manufacturing today, you have to have a sufficient background education in any one form, all right? So the importance to us is obvious in terms of that additional education. But I'd like to take it a little bit of a different direction, and that is instead of talking about some of the decisions that are being made by higher education leadership, the board, or the campus leaders, I'd like to talk about a bigger picture, a strategic opportunity that I think higher education in North Dakota can have on our economy. Right now, we have between 20 and 30,000 open unfilled jobs across the state. 20 to 30,000. If you take the high school graduates of North Dakota, somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000, there's not enough kids. We can't fill those jobs possibly. If you add in people that you think you can get to relocate here to fill our jobs, we still have jobs open, you're not going to get enough. Once they plant the roots someplace else, it's so difficult to get them to move. You're not going to fill those open jobs, those 20 to 30,000 open jobs, through bringing people in through immigration. You're not going to fill those jobs by bringing in former military people. So how do we get enough people here to fill those jobs? I would like at least to start a conversation about maybe modifying the mission and the overall goal of higher education to not just educating our workforce, but actually bringing them here, bringing more of them here at all levels, and making sure that we have the capacity to educate enough of them. I know at the College of Science, they've got 7 to 10 job offers for every graduate. Well, if their classes are full, you need bigger classes. When to create more seats in those at that institution, you need more dollars. It's expensive to educate trades. So I would at least like a conversation about how we could possibly use our higher education system to bring more people to the state. Because if you get them young, you have an opportunity to keep them.
Representative Dosh, your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree. I mean, the need for people in the state is critical. I mean, there is shortages. We have trouble finding work. We actually bring in work-study students from China to help in the summer demand, as does Medora and many other places. So we need to, and that's maybe where higher ed, we need to be proactive, I think, come up with ideas to get younger families to move here that can help fill these jobs. Immigration, yeah, I think we need those folks. However, I think when they're brought into our communities, they should be better prepared. They come in, they can't speak English. There's a real communication problem. A lot of times they end up on our social service roles right away. So that's what we have to change. If we're going to bring people in, then let's have a program in our higher ed or our trade schools that we can funnel these folks into and get them trained for those jobs we need.
Isn't this really a recipe, though, for, because we created a higher ed system that gauged success based on if your institution has 100 students and yours has 200 and yours has 300 and yours has 400, by God, you're the most important and you're doing the best job. Right? Can everybody agree on that?
Yeah.
Because we did. The round table put that onus back to the Mayvilles and the Valleys that said it's all about the number of butts in the seat.
I would disagree with that a little bit
Okay.
because it also is about the mission that the colleges and universities have. For example, the mission at Wahpeton is entirely different than the mission is at Mayville. The mission at University of North Dakota is different in some respects than the mission at North Dakota State University. So the mission would guide, I think, somewhat
Did the funding?
It should guide the funding, but certainly the funding is based somewhat on butts in the seats because you have more costs involved. But on the other hand, those missions that every one of those 11 colleges and universities that we have are very important to our state. Kristen Baszler, Dr. Baszler talked about just recently about teacher shortages. We've talked about welders. We've talked about our two-year programs. We're struggling in getting doctors to come to our state, family practice doctors, and we're training them at the University of North Dakota, and we have a rural med program that we will cover their tuition if they come back to North Dakota and practice. We have 8 slots available. We can only get 2 to apply for it every year.
I want to go a little bit historical on the point I was trying to make, though. And Bill, this is a perspective I think you can add a lot to, which is the roundtable. What Dave Nething did with the committee on the roundtable and the people that were involved in it, the mission of the roundtable was to come in and basically tell the legislature to fund us and butt out and judge us based upon how we've done. That's why I took that line of questioning in the beginning, right?
And I agree with that, Joel. You know, to answer your previous question, we succeed, but a lot of times I think we succeed in spite of ourselves and everybody getting in the way of our success. We go back to the roundtable. The roundtable was driven by GNDA at that point, this organization. And the idea was, at that point, the business community really felt that the legislature was micromanaging the university system. So the roundtable was put together and it developed the system. I'm not sure exactly what it ended up being, not from what it was perceived, but what it actually ended up, that Joel was talking about, that each president would manage their university and the legislature would fund it and kind of butt out. I think right from the moment that that happened, or certainly a couple of years afterwards, the legislature decided this was a mistake in terms of policy to let these guys have a free checkbook. And if you look at some of the things that have happened, they have not exactly been the best stewards of the North Dakota dollar that they could have been. Now, it doesn't perceive across the whole thing, but you know, they do some stupid things when you think about the universities. But hey, listen, they've done some really dumb things. So now the question gets to be, and we haven't answered that, and I don't think we're going to be a success until we do, is what is the proper balance between the legislature in terms of the funding and oversight of the dollars, which they properly have, and the universities doing their job. Until we get to that point, there's going to be a lot of tug and pull on the system. And I think you see it every session. And you can come up with all of the examples that you want. If you're getting an average of a 20 or 12% increase, which they probably have gotten in their budgets in the last 12 years, or last 4 bienniums, I'm sorry, last 8 years, and you have inflation is about 3%, and yet you've had an increase in tuition, how does that make sense to the people of North Dakota? And therefore, how does it make sense to the legislature? I'm going up to 8 or 9% in budgeting. I'm increasing tuition. Inflation is 3%. How can this possibly be right? So until we answer those questions and first get the balance that is necessary between the legislature where they're comfortable and yet the universities are able to run their own university, I think we're going to continue to have the problems that we do.
From a business standpoint, Tom, I want you to get a chance to address that.
Well, I also sat on the roundtable, and I always viewed the roundtable as simply a means to express my position to both the legislature and higher education and give our perspective. It was our means of a voice, that at least we had a means of expressing that.
I guess what I wanted to know from your standpoint, though, as somebody at the end of the month has to have enough money in the bank to pay those check blanks, right? How you look at this is, because we were left higher ed to run as with a business type model, and whether or not you think they've achieved that, Tom.
I was born and raised in North Dakota. I attended a 2-year institution, attended a 4-year institution. From my perspective, I think higher education in North Dakota has been absolutely necessary and provides a return to the state citizens. It does provide a good return. Do they have challenges, opportunities for improvement? Yeah, of course they do. Which one of us in here doesn't have a need to improve? They have to do a better job of making sure that they're providing the talent that the businesses in North Dakota need to fill the jobs, and perhaps spend less money, resources, on training that isn't needed in North Dakota. So yeah, they can manage things differently.
We actually were talking about this before we came out here, is that it doesn't matter whether you're running a business, an educational system, or a nonprofit organization. Things don't run like rockets. They run like roller coasters. And the trick is to eliminate the amount of the mistakes in maybe curriculum, the mistakes in funding, the changes that need to be made. But our higher education system should and would and should be a magnet for our state. Not only in attracting students, and we need to go outside of North Dakota to get our workforce where it should be. We need to make sure that we're attracting students from South Dakota, and the 2-year technical schools right now in South Dakota are going to be able to offer no tuition. Now just think about that as a competitive nature for our state. One idea that I've kind of kicked around a little bit is a concept of Grow North Dakota. Grow North Dakota would say that, number one, we should really look at in-state and out-of-state tuition being about the same. Because out-of-state tuition, right now, it is close to $11,000 difference at some of our major universities. And if it was the same, we should be able to attract students from outside our state to come here. And secondly, if they graduate in a certain period of time and with a certain grade point average, we would be able to take a look at our retention rates, which is what we were talking about earlier, as well as our graduation rates. And when I say on time, I mean a 4-year student graduates in 4 years, a 2-year student graduates in 2 years, and then rebate back to them maybe their last year of tuition or some incentive. We do that with our rural med program I talked about earlier. We have 26 student doctors in that now. But we need to attract more to our state to fill the workforce. We only have, we have like Tom said, 40,000 jobs in our state that are unfilled. Just think about that. That's the population of Dickinson and Jamestown together. And the cities in our state, in our university system, and our quality of life, and what we're trying to do here will grow immensely once we address those issues.
Representative Dosh, this is aimed directly at you. should we subsidize, for lack of a better word, out-of-state students?
Well, Joel, again, because we have a need for students now in our state, I think that, you know, when we talk about subsidizing a student, what I am in favor of is you charge that student tuition while they're here, but you do it similar to like our med program, where that says, if you then come to our state and you work in our state, we will forgive 25% of your tuition every year for the next 4 years. We have to get something in return for our money. You know, the med school, many years ago, we were graduating all sorts of doctors out of there and heavily subsidizing them, and they left the state. No one would come back. So then we had the program of, you know what, if you come back to our community, we will help subsidize that. But I don't think that the taxpayers of North Dakota should be providing free education to anyone that wants to come in our state without some caveat that says it's free only if you stay here.
Well, with all due respect, Roger Johnson and I put that on the ballot in North Dakota. Remember that? We put the youth initiative on the ballot in North Dakota, and we got beat about 2-1. And that was, if you stayed in the state, you worked in the state, we'll, through the Bank of North Dakota, pay your money back. And North Dakota said no to it. And in fact, this group and others opposed it at the time.
But Joel, when did you put that forward? Times have changed.
Yes.
When I was growing up, I heard it from the legislature, I heard it from the politicians, I heard it from everybody. We're losing the best and brightest to other states. Well, I had a little problem with that because I decided to stay. And I don't know what that made me. You know, whatever, I guess I didn't learn fast enough. But today it's a different game. We're keeping those kids in record numbers because we have the job. They didn't leave because they wanted to. They left because there were no jobs. Now there's jobs. We should be looking, for the first time in our history, at recruiting the best and brightest and paying for their entire education from other states. Because this is the first time we get to do that.
Bill, do you agree with that?
I do. I don't see anything wrong with that, with recruitment and going into that. My only caveat would be, I think we have to fix the governance of the higher education system.
We're going to
before
get to
we
that in a
Okay.
second. I want to focus on this, because it is very important what Tom brought to the table as part of the discussion here. And this is a completely different voice than what there was back in our day. Lincoln freed the slaves. We weren't making the kids stay here.
No, but
We told them, if you stay here, you find a job here, we'll forget your school debt. So I don't think times are that different. You know, it still came down to whether or not they could find a job here, Tom.
Well,
That was my
that's
point.
the difference right now,
And
is
Joe,
that there is so many unfulfilled positions.
So
that
my
that's the
point
difference.
is, you do what you're going to do. Say you're going to do what you're putting in place. You're going to use government to subsidize higher education, much the way we do, in fairness to Tom, K-12, right? So you do that, and we go on tough economic times. Do you pull it?
What says you can't?
When the jobs aren't there, do you pull it?
What says you can't?
That generation of young North Dakotans don't deserve the same benefit the other ones had.
You can do what you can do, what you can afford to do.
I don't think with the growth of our population, with the growth of what's happening in some of our cities throughout the state, that that's going to be an issue.
Well, I like your picture of the future. I like it.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, but I'm just saying, I've been through up and down cycles on this. Let's get to the governance. Let's get to that. There's been a number of questions that have come up about the tiers of education and whether or not our two university institutions are treated completely separately than others. And there's been a line of questioning that's come in about athletics and how the role athletics play in the judgment of the State Board of Higher Education itself. I'm just going to lay it out there. If you see how it's played out in the media, there's been no question whatsoever, starting back to Joe Chapman, that NDSU has not exactly taken its guidance from the State Board of Higher Education, whether you want to call them rogue, whether you want to call them whatever. And UND hasn't been all that great either. You've got two campus presidents who decided they wanted better houses than the legislature approved, okay? So I'm going to aim this first at Representative Dasch and ask you, does what you say as a legislator matter whatsoever to the State Board of Higher Education?
Well, Joel, to be honest with you, I think very little, and I'll just put that out there. I have been very frustrated with higher ed. You know, you talked earlier about the roundtable, and I think it was well-meaning. We don't want to micromanage our higher ed. I've also, you know, I believe let the university presidents manage their universities, but we need a strong chancellor to manage the purse strings, and we haven't had that. And what we've seen over the last 10 years, we've seen the state funding of higher education increase 133%. At the same time, same period, we've seen an 8% growth in our students. It's ridiculous, and it's frustrating. You see administrative bloat occurring at our universities. And if you go back and look, the last 7 years, there's been roughly 3,000 more students in our education system today. At the same time, the same 7-year period, administrative staff has gone up over 1,100 positions. So in the last 7 years in our higher ed system, for every roughly 3 new full-time students that have come on board, we've added a full-time administrative position. That's where the money's going in higher ed. It's you know, I mean, it's been taken away from starting up new programs that we need, even paying teachers decently. It's just this administrative bloat. When you have university presidents making more than our governor, when they live in mansions and compared to our governor, when you have a university president that needs an $80,000 chauffeur, you know, that's where it's gotten out of hand. That's been our frustration with the Board of Higher Ed. They need to be tough. They need to say no to the university presidents. They need to be reasonable. There's no reason why we should have the funding of higher ed double the rate of inflation year after year after year. Tuition rates continue to go up. They need to stand up and stand up to these university presidents and control things again.
Dr. Melliker, I want to give you a chance to respond to that. Sir.
Okay. University presidents, to me, are like mosquitoes in a room where you're trying to go to sleep at night. They are...
Excuse me, can you repeat that?
They are mosquitoes in a room when you're trying to go to sleep at night.
Okay.
And I mean that with all graciousness and concern, because they are, no matter how you phrase it, they are the ones that stir the drink.
Right.
They are the ones that drive the show. They are the ones that make that university go and move forward. And we need strong presidents at our universities and colleges. We have some very strong ones throughout our system, and it depends who you talk to. As I go out among my friends and people that I talk to, number one, they say I'm nuts for doing this, but number two, they say that, you know, why should so-and-so get this much money? But the salaries in the structure that we have for our universities, colleges, and presidents have been based on what the national averages are to get the best quality person for that job. Occasionally, that doesn't work out. Now, to answer your question about sports and athletics, who can argue with what sports and athletics, with the addition of other things in our universities, have done for the cities and for the programs? For example, the hockey team at UND. For example, the football team at NDSU. I mean, those programs have brought an unbelievable amount of press and coverage, whether we like it or not, to our cities and to our universities, and has been really a magnet for both of those universities, drawing people.
But I want to go back to what Representative Dosh said before I go to Bill. And I know I've got an old football player sitting on the end there too. Yeah, I knew you played at UND. But my point is this. He's saying that we appropriate and you don't watch the money. And he's saying that a university president can hire himself a chauffeur and be that arrogant about it. Some might say that there was a clear directive last legislative session that all legal counsel go in-house to the State Board of Higher Education, and then that same university president went about taking his legal counsel and finding him a different job and keeping him right next to him. And it would seem to me that what Representative Dosh was getting at is you're not watching the hen house.
I would probably disagree with him on a few of the issues. The issue that happened at North Dakota State University where Chris Wilson, and I would assume that's the person you're referring to, was applied for the position, and he was granted the position of Chief of Staff for Dr. Bashani. Dr. Bashani was able to, through his budget, change his budget so he could afford to have Chris Wilson as his Chief of Staff. Now, the difficult part of that is that Chris Wilson was an attorney that was hired by the university system, and now the attorneys are hired by the Attorney General. Is Chris Wilson a very competent Chief of Staff? Yes. And will he be a very competent Chief of Staff? The most difficult part that I think the university will have is to make sure that he's not a lawyer. And that he's the Chief of Staff. It's interesting, when this whole concept came up, I read it in the paper, as all of us did, and I heard it on the news, and I actually didn't know anything about it till that time, but I was talking to my wife about it, and my wife said, I thought he had a Chief of Staff. And I think in some of the universities and colleges, they might be called something different. For example, in our university system, Dr. Scogan had General Songzing, who was the Chief of Staff. Did they work well together? You bet. And did we try to get the car out of the ditch from some of the issues that happened in the past? I wasn't there in the past. But I think they worked real hard to get that trust factor there. The problem the way that I feel about the legislative issues is that the short time that I have been here, we have not built those relationships. Right, wrong, or indifferent, we need to build those relationships, whether it's through key person programs, whether it's through involvement, whether it's through getting legislators involved more in some of our meetings. I think that's very important, and I think that would solve some of that.
Tom, I want to get your take on it because to me, these are side issues compared to your bigger issue.
Let me apply some basic business principle to higher education. To be successful in business, you have basically increase your sales or reduce your costs. Okay? Sometimes you have to do some of both. All right? If we have too much costs in higher education, we can cut them and reduce the deliveries. Or instead of 3,000 new students, let's do 10x that so that we can fill the jobs in North Dakota. 30,000 new students. Because frankly, that's the only way we're going to fill the jobs in North Dakota. There is no other way to get enough people here. So go 10x. So if you leave your costs where they are in terms of the administrative overhead, but you increase the number of students in our system to fill the jobs, you improve efficiencies. So apply that. On the sports thing, I'd just say any way we can get kids here and get an opportunity to keep them here works for me.
Well, I think it's pretty hard to argue that ESPN Game Day is bad for North Dakota.
Right.
Do you admit that? Bill, I want to give you a broad scope here about governance, because you were there in the beginning with the roundtable. You were an architect with that. And I want to get an overview from you about where you think higher ed went off the rail when it comes to its governance.
And I think there is an answer to that. I think that when we were talking about the governance and where we're going, we really were looking at it from a business standpoint in terms of the management, not the goals, the sales goals, or the cost goals, or the budgeting goals, which are, they're important, but they're down there. But in terms of the overall scope and the management, and I'll liken it to MDU. We have an organization out there, MDU Resources, only because I know this well enough to at least sound reasonably articulate. And we have an organization out there called MDU Resources, which is the head organization. They have holding companies or companies that operate under them to talk about Williston Basin. What would happen if Resources, the corporate office, decided this is the way we're going to go, and the guy at Williston Basin said, no, I don't think that's very good for Williston Basin. I think that in terms of Williston Basin's best interest, which I'm going to decide, not you, who are my boss, that we're going to go this, and we're going to start doing this, and we're not going to really listen to you on this issue because you're not right. Well, I'd venture to say Rick could probably have that guy in his office in about 23 seconds. There'd be a complete chewing, And either you're going to go down and follow into the corporate line, whatever we said from a strong overview, or you're out of a job. Now, that's what I think the idea was when we talked about the round table and making it more business-like. We have to create a spot in there, and Mark talked about it, the chancellor, who's a strong leader. And he has to be able to tell his folks that this is the corporate line. This is what we got from the legislature. This is what we're going to do. When I worked for Equitable Life, there was 43,000 employees, 430,000 employees, worldwide. By the time you submitted your budget and did it, whatever they came back down with, you're expected to be on board. You try to make it work. If it doesn't work, you certainly have the ability to go back and say, hey, this isn't working, we got to change it, we got to do this, we got that. It seems to me the disconnect is when you get to an individual campus, suddenly that individual campus becomes more important than the system. And what I think is best for the individual campus I'll go against that if I think it helps my university.
Go ahead, Doctor.
I just want to talk about the job that I feel our colleges and universities are doing. We have probably some of the best pass rates throughout our system in various areas, whether it's physical therapy, to board scores in medical school, to teacher scores. So our system has done a good job, and whether it's welding or the two-year programs as well, I feel we've done a good job in continuing to promote that and escalate that. Now, we do have problems. We have lots of problems. We talked about the retention rates earlier. We talked about the graduation rates. The bureaucracy that's involved, which might explain some of the extra costs, is just unbelievable, and I think we need to get a handle on some of that. But our biggest issue right now is workforce. We need to make sure from our 4-year campuses down to our 2-year campuses that we are supplying the workforce for our state. And
there was a comment in here that said, why can't we get a state college of science type institution delivery system in western North Dakota?
That's an interesting question. We weren't able to get an additional building for the State School of Science, the Wahpeton State School of Science in Fargo. So
then let me direct that to Representative Dosh.
Well, the building that they're referring to, or the request was right around $65 million to put a campus in Fargo. The comments that we hear as legislators all the time, do we really need 11 colleges and universities in a state the size of North Dakota? And yet we come back and say, let's have Wahpeton build in Fargo, and pretty soon Fargo's building at Fargo. In fact, I believe they tried that, and we put that down as well. But we don't need more institutions out there. If we need to expand the program where it's at down in Wahpeton, then that's what we need to look at doing. But putting more locations all over the place, and then you have more administration, and you have more bureaucracy, that's not going to solve the problem.
Tom?
7 to 10 job offers for every graduate from our trade schools, namely State College of Science. That means that for every company looking for an employee, they've got a big pick. You need more people graduating. You need more capacity to educate to provide enough graduates to fill the workforce. Now, you can say, well, let's just leave it in Wahpeton. Everybody will come to Wahpeton. No, the business and industry wants it convenient. We need more capacity, whether it's in Bismarck or Fargo or Wahpeton, to educate trades than what we have today. We can't meet the demands of business.
Doug Burgum spoke to our we had a retreat back in June, and he did a presentation about what changes are happening in higher education. And one of the issues he talked about was Jim Clifton. He's the chairman and CEO of Gallup, and I want to read this. He said, cities with inspired workforces will win at job creation. In Fargo alone, there's 7,000 jobs that we need to fill. Colleges and universities have by design the best ecosystem for I can't say that, and innovation. And that's true, because We need to have our campuses and our colleges and universities where the people are.
Somebody directed this question at Representative Dosh where they said, name 3 priorities. Basically what they're saying is name 3 priorities to make higher ed system better. Okay, I'm gonna take that further. I'm gonna take it to all of you. Be quick about it so we get through all 3. Representative Dosh?
To make the system work better, I think they need to be more accountable. I believe that the focus, and this is where I believe the State Board of Higher Ed really needs to step up and look at the places like Wahpeton, look at the demands and say, you know what, we need to double or triple that program. That's where the State Board needs to come up and say, let's direct these resources there and let's get that accomplished. The other thing is, I believe that the Chancellor needs to control the purse strings so that they can allocate the money. As a legislator, it is frustrating when we continue fund higher ed. Like I said, 133% increase in the last 10 years, and yet you see the administrative bloat. We need focus, and
Okay, you get 2. Bill?
The only one thing they have to do, they have to learn how to take one on the chin for their university in order to improve the system statewide. If they were willing to do that, not fight for money so much for their institution, we could probably fund more seats in the 2-year education, which I completely agree with, in the 2-year things. But do you think you're going to get the major institutions to give up 1 cent of funding in order to fund more 2-year colleges? Don't think so.
Tom, I'm going to go with you next.
Well, as I stated earlier, I think to be more effective, we need to use the higher education system to bring in the talent that's needed in order to fill the open jobs in the state. Unfortunately, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy for legislature if they do nothing. And by that I mean, if you do not fill these jobs soon, they will get filled somewhere else. They're not going away, they'll get filled somewhere else. And then we won't need the students. So guess what? Then you don't need to put more money into it.
The things that I wrote down that need improvement, I feel graduation rates, retention rates, which I talked about earlier. We need to seriously take a look at out-of-state versus in-state tuition. We need to make sure that we are aware of the changes that are occurring in higher education, whether it's in South Dakota or Minnesota or other states that we are actually in competition with to get their students. We need to reduce the bureaucracy, and whether it's in the way that our schools and universities are run, and also we need to reduce the bureaucracy in students applying for colleges and universities as well as for financial aid. And we need to continue to improve our transferability between our colleges and universities, which from what I understand, we're getting better at it, but I think we need to be even better.
Dr. Melliker, since I've met you, I've done nothing but enjoy our conversations. I have a lot of respect for you, but I have to ask you this question. There's a lot of ways to communicate, and you say one of the breakdowns is between the communication between the board, the higher ed system, and people like Representative Dosh who make that big decision. There are many ways to communicate, though. Mm-hmm. Here, with what GNDC is doing, obviously is a great one. But when you communicate by them saying you're going to spend $900,000 on a house and you spend $2.5 million, that's a form of communication to these guys. Mm-hmm. And so is the communication breakdown and the respect for the legislature, because oftentimes I hear that the legislature doesn't respect the job of higher education enough. They need to stay out of their way, they don't understand it. But do you understand the position that these guys are put in when they go home to their districts?
The way I look at it is that we have a chair, and the chair has the legislators, it has our State Board of Higher Education, it has students, families, and taxpayers in North Dakota that hold the chair up. And we all need to work together to make that chair stable. What has happened in the past, and again, I'm new at this, I've only been here about a year, but from what I understand from talking to people, what's happened in the past, that trust had broken down for various reasons, whether it was a previous chancellor issue, to budgetary issues, to the president's houses, the controversial issues that you have brought up. At the end of the day, however, we need as strong as we can. We need to make our higher education system in the state of North Dakota to be as strong as it can be.
Is there any study, any data whatsoever on what Tom's getting at? That you recruit these students from out of state, you bring them in state, you educate them, and then they will stay here? Higher ed's great at studies, and they're really good at keeping track of alumni because they want money. So is there any data that they stay here?
The most recent comment that I heard is very similar to what Tom talked about, and I think it's true, is that if people come here, they stay here, they meet people here, they live here, not only are they going to be stronger for our state, but, and I've heard numbers of 40% will stay, 60% might leave.
Representative Dosh, do you believe that?
I believe that, I think the statistics now right around that 22% of people that are educated here stay here. And now within the last couple of years, I wouldn't be surprised if that number has
It's an all-time record.
Has,
Retention of outside state students is at an all-time
greatly
record.
increased, yes, with the job. So,
Okay.
you know,
Another question that keeps coming up is why don't we ever talk about faculty? The low pay they have, the retention rate of faculty. I know we only have 5 minutes left here, but it goes right back to the debate we had earlier about K-12 education and paying teachers. Do we pay our educators enough to keep them here to do the job that they can do? And I'm going to start with you, Doctor.
The studies that I have read showed that, I think it was not this session, but the session before, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think they made a true effort to raise salaries throughout the state of North Dakota for teachers in our system. I don't have any numbers as far as the percentages of faculty that have left our system recently, but I know that we are attracting power types of people to, like the Hess Collaborative Center at UND. We're attracting good, solid people to the medical school. We're attracting good, solid people at NDSU as well. And I would assume in Wahpeton that's probably true. So it would seem to me that our salaries and benefits always need to be looked at. They do in every job, in every career. But maybe they aren't as bad as some people are making them out to be, but they may not be as good as some people want them
Here's
to be as well.
a message that came to us, said, North Dakota retention of graduates includes 37% for Minnesota students, 36.4 from Montana, and 33.9 from South Dakota. Tom, is that a success to you?
It's three times what it used to be. And that's because we have the jobs to retain them. Can we
Bill,
do better?
give me your take on those numbers.
I think that's good. I know that, like Tom, that the numbers used to be really, really worse than that. We were down in the teens in terms of that. So we've got some jobs. We can keep them, and we can keep them here. So I'm encouraged by the growth. It looks to me like whatever time frame it is, it's doubled.
Good exercise. Somebody said, ask for a show of hands of how many people came to North Dakota for higher education and stayed. So you were out of state. Raise your hand. So there's some out there. There's quite a few out there. I would close with this, with the limited time we have, that one of the things that your new chancellor has is just what you started with. And I think most people would agree on both sides of this issue, that he's going to get graded on whether or not he is the man in charge of higher education, of all higher education. And if we can agree on that, I think we already made great strides. Representative Dosh, you believe that?
I agree.
Bill?
I agree. It has to start somewhere, and we need some strong focal figure, focus point to straighten this thing out.
Tom?
I'll judge them by the effectiveness of providing the students, the graduates, to fill our jobs.
And Doctor?
And I would agree with that. He was hired to do exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. Thank you. Gentlemen, how about a big round of applause for that? Thanks for your time, guys.
Gentlemen, exit stage right here. Stage right, yes. Andy has a gift for you. You bet. All right, time for our question. Is higher education in North Dakota headed in the right direction or wrong direction. You know the drill by now. You can text the keyword, either GNDC 17, 18, 19, 20, or 21 to the number 22333. They've hit the bullseye. They're headed in the right direction. The wrong direction. They're off the rails. Don't know, don't care. Let's watch the live results come in. And it looks like we've got a winner. Couple minutes here if you want to grab a soda, a coffee, a water over to your left, take a quick break, and then we'll be back with Chris Berg in our last panel of the day, Taxes, Taxes, Taxes.
Make it Sunday.